I've got all our footings formed, poured, and stripped. I'm kind of cleaned up, and I'm getting ready to attach the ICF forms. And I figured I'd make a little video on how I'm going to do it. It's a little bit different than I've done it in the past, but what I'm basically using is a bunch of scrap lumber from a deck demo and some little pieces of plywood I had left over from jobs. And in the past, I've used a metal piece of L that you can buy for like sheet metal, and you fasten it into the concrete, and then you can screw your forms in from the outside. But this time, because I didn't want to buy it, I just ripped down some 2x6 in half. And what I'm going to end up doing is I set it back 1/2 inch from the line. That's the outside of my wall. And I'll come along and screw that in, or framing nail it. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use, but probably screws so I can take it apart after. And that'll give me something here to screw my ICF forms in to set my level. I mean, all the footings are all within 1/4 inch, but it's nice to pick them up a little bit, enough so that you can, on the inside, get a bead of spray foam underneath in between your braces. So I'm going to show you how I'm fastening these down, because I mean, you could use Tapcons or you could use like a Hilti gun, but the concrete's pretty green. I mean, we only poured this, I guess, what was it, I don't realize it was a week ago anyway, but you know, the concrete's pretty green, so you can actually drive a nail, a proper concrete nail, into it. But the problem is afterwards, pulling it apart, those nails really hold. And then, being the concrete's green, if you're nailing out here on the edge, you can break a piece out, you know, a big chunk would just break out, you know, it's not ideal. So what I'm going to do here is I've been you know, hammer drilling them, and I drill in a little piece of, you know, tie wire, just like that. And I've got some old deck screws left over. They're the PAM deck screws. They're a little bit a little heavier, a little more shear strength. They're just a good reusable screw, and being Torx, you know, you can back them out really easily after you've used them. I mean, this is the 3rd time these have been used, and look at them, they look brand new. And one thing too, if you find that you're going through these bits, like this is an SDS Plus, I think it's a smaller SDS drill. It's just a cheapie from Canadian Tire. It was 99 bucks, but this has been a really solid little drill actually. But one thing is, you'll burn through these bits, and you know, they're expensive. So 90% of the time, I mean, I wasn't sure about this, but after a friend had told me to do this, it's ringing true that when you're drilling, these bits get hot. And the problem is that when this bit gets hot on the outside here, it'll actually spit that carbide out, and that's when they burn out, because really that carbide is so hard that you should be able to use that carbide for years. But the problem is they get too hot. The heat's their enemy. So if you're drilling a bunch of these holes, don't get in a big rush and drill them all in a row. You know, drill 1 or 2, and then keep a little bucket of water with you. And though if you finish drilling a hole, just dunk it in the water, and then when you set the drill hole down, it'll sit there and cool off. And you'll find, in doing that with the SDS Plus or even the SDS Max drills, you're going to get 10 times the life out of your bit. You know, now I didn't know this until recently, but I mean, I drilled all the holes in the bedrock for all of these footings with 1 bit, and it still looks like brand new. So, let's get started. couple blocks, and I'll show you how I was planning to do this with this plywood. What I'll do is I'll actually roughly lay out the first 2 rows and then clip it all together, and that should straighten them generally, and then come back along with the transit and pick them up at the ends of each block of the top row and screw them into the forms when I hit the right level. And I'll probably put a screw in, you know, every other web, so every 16 inches, and that should hold it really solid. You know, like any pounding or any bouncing around isn't going to settle these forms down and change any elevations. I know in the manual there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I thought I'd share the way I'm doing it because it's kind of a commonly asked question, and it's kind of a tricky area because in the manual all they tell you to do is stand up your braces. You know, lock the first 2 courses together, stand up your braces, screw them in, and then set the elevation of these with your braces and spray foam both sides. Well, that's great in a perfect world, but you know, for one thing, you've got 36 inches of forms sticking up in the air, and then you have 10-foot braces standing up, and you've got to set your angle braces back, and then you've got to work around them for an extra course, and it's kind of annoying. I'm not saying it doesn't work, it's also not as accurate. You know, those screwing in those braces in the perfect spot, and then, you know, it's just, you know, I want it down to the 16th, like it's got to be right on. So this is the way I've come up with to do it. Even when I pick it up, because I like to pick up the form, you know, half an inch or so, and that gives you a good gap to fill with spray foam. You know, if you only leave a 1/4 inch, you're not going to get a good bead of spray foam in there to seal it up. And yeah, that's just my way of doing it. Again, you know, like my old boss, he'd buy, I don't remember what it was called, but I think it's a, you know, like a steel stud product. It's like a L track, maybe they call it. And so it's basically a sheet metal L. And he would do the same thing, you know, when the concrete was green, just poured, you come back the next day and you nail it in with concrete nails along, just like this. And same thing, you know, you pick it up and you screw it in. And the one thing that's a real advantage to that, I know that sheet metal L, you have to pay for it, you know, and you know, you buy it, I think, in 10-foot lengths, so it adds up. It's expensive. But then you don't even have to take that off the forms. You can leave it on, your membrane still wraps over top of it, no problem. And yeah, you can leave it on and bury it. In this scenario, you can't do that, right? I'll have to pull these cleats off, which shouldn't be a big deal. It won't take long. And then, but it will give me a nice formed edge on the inside to wrap the membrane down over. It won't be lumpy, and it'll be a nice formed edge. I'm really happy with how these cleats worked. So it made it very easy to set the elevation, and you know, when you see all the blocks all nice and snapped together, nice and tight, that means it's level. I'll show you here. Piece of plywood and a 2x4, big pry bar. So you'd screw this in, you set your two forms, they're all nice and straight and put together. Screw that in, take your transit, and you're putting it on the top of that block. You already know what your elevation is going to be, and then you can just pry it up slowly and wait for it to give you the solid beep, and have somebody put a screw in it. And right now this isn't braced on the far side, but it's all set to the elevation on the inside. So you can see how that would work now. As soon as you put that wall level, It's right where you want it to be. We're supposed to get a bunch of rain over the next 2 days, so I just threw that ditch in there and stockpiled some of the fill up on this side to let the water go. We got all this fill because they're redoing our road, so luckily the contractor that took the bid needed somewhere quick to get rid of the fill, so we took about 40 or 50 tandem loads. So when we put it in, we just quickly put it in there because we didn't have time, and then put one piece of 4-inch pipe to drain it. Well, it worked okay, but if we're gonna get that volume of rain, it needs to be able to flow. So, but as for the ICF, those cleats worked amazing. I mean, the wall is exactly where it needs to be. Kept everything nice and clean. And I would definitely recommend doing it that way. Now we've got some blue skin on here. And there it is, poured. Never underestimate old iron. These old machines are awesome. Have a good one.